There's a myth I think we've all heard, and there's an unfamiliar word we're going to talk about today that describes it. See, there's a phrase that keeps showing up constantly in red pill, black pill, and incel circles. And this single word is used to explain romantic rejection, female preference, dating inequality, and basically the entire landscape of modern relationships. And this word is hypergamy. Hypergamy. It's the claim that goes something like this. It says women are hardwired to keep dating up. They only want men with more status, more looks, more money. And if you're not in that top 10%, you're invisible. Because female nature is biologically programmed to chase the highest value mate, and in the process discard everyone else. Now you've probably heard it before, and many of you probably have even believed it. Because when you feel constantly overlooked or unwanted or even discarded, it sounds true. It explains the pain, it makes sense of the silence, and it gives your heartbreak a reason. But what if it's not true? Or at least not in the way that it's being sold? What if hypergamy isn't some inescapable law of nature, but instead it's a distorted narrative that's built on a partial truth, twisted by fear and weaponized by grievances? In this episode today, we're going to unpack that myth piece by piece. We're going to trace where the idea of hypergamy came from and what science actually says about it, how it got twisted along the way, and why believing it might be hurting your chance at the very connection that you are longing for. But let's start off with, where did this word hypergamy or even the idea come from? The definition of hypergamy, the term hypergamy, it comes from anthropology of all places. It originally described the practice of marrying up in societal status, often in caste-based or hierarchical societies. You see, in many parts of the world, especially in those that are traditional in culture, women are incentivized or even pressured to marry men who are higher wealth or have a higher class and standing. But this wasn't about the female biology per se. It was about survival in patriarchal systems. In societies where women had limited rights and resources, or even autonomy, marrying a higher status man was often the only pathway they had to security, to safety, and even to social mobility. So yes, hypergamy existed once upon a time, but not because it was hardwired into the female nature. It was a cultural adaptation to a system where power flowed primarily through men. Now fast forward to today, and the internet has revived this term, but it's stripped it of any context. And what was once a societal phenomenon that was rooted in inequality is now described like it's a universal biological truth. It says all women only want rich, hot alpha men, and everyone else, well, you're doomed. And that's not just misleading, it's deeply damaging. But let's think about what the science says about this word hypergamy. So some of the data looks like this. Yes, there are studies that have shown that people are often drawn to certain traits like confidence or kindness or physical attraction, intelligence, stability, all these things. And yes, in some contexts, women report preferences for partners who demonstrate ambition or resourcefulness. But that's not hypergamy. That there is mutual mate selection shaped by the cultural preferences, personal history, and even human complexity. But that's not biological programming alone. In fact, the largest meta-analyses on attraction consistently show that men prioritize physical attractiveness more than women, while women are often seeking emotional availability, trustworthiness, and stability. These are qualities that for women build long-term connections. But what else is also true? It's true that most people partner within their own social and physical attractiveness when they're considering levels. Most women do not end up with top-tier alpha men. And status isn't a fixed ladder. It's perceived differently by every individual, right? But if you've been told for years that women only want tall, rich, muscular CEOs who have six packs, and then it's easy to start seeing every relationship through that lens, even when the data tells a more nuanced story. Hypergamy, in the way that it's discussed online, is not scientific in its principles. It's a storyline, a coping mechanism, and it's being treated as one's destiny. Now, here's how that narrative can become a trap. See, here's the thing about belief systems. They don't just explain your reality, they also shape your reality as well. So if you believe hypergamy is real and universal, it doesn't just help you to make sense of the rejection that you're experiencing, it also gives you permission to just stop trying. You might think, there's no point in improving myself because she'll never want someone like me. Or you might find yourself saying, if I'm not rich or tall or a Chad, why bother trying? I'm doomed anyway. And every woman is just using me to trade up to the next level. And that's not a worldview, that's a wound. And here's where it gets worse, because believing in hypergamy doesn't just poison your hope. It also poisons your perception of women as well. It turns them from fellow human beings into predators, from complex humans into calculating machines, from potential partners into adversaries. And when you carry that belief into dating, you can only guess what happens. You come across as guarded, as bitter, or as accusatory, and you project rejection before it ever even happens. You test women to see if they're gold diggers. You assume manipulation even when someone's being sincere. And women feel that energy, don't they? They don't know the theory perhaps that you're carrying, but they can sense the cynicism, the defensiveness, the walls that you're erecting, which makes real connection far more difficult, which also in turn deepens your pain and reinforces that belief that you're subscribing to. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But let's consider what gets missed in the female nature argument, shall we? You see, when people talk about female nature, they often frame it like it's fixed, that women are programmed to use men, monkey branch, and discard anyone else who loses value. But let's ask the obvious. Who gets to define what value means? Because the truth is, different women want wildly different things. Some are drawn to ambition, some are drawn to sensitivity, some to adventure, some to depth, and others to steadiness. There is no universal female nature, just like there's no universal male desire. We're all shaped by the biology and our upbringing, by instincts and experiences that we've had in life. The female nature myth turns women into a monolith, and it flattens their humanity. It ignores their cultural histories, their personality differences, and relationship goals as well. It also ignores the very real truth that some women act harmfully, not because of gendered nature, but because they're hurting, just like men hurt. And when you view rejection through the lens of hypergamy, every no, it becomes proof of your worthlessness and her superficiality. But sometimes a no just means we weren't the right fit. And that's not a betrayal, that's a part of the human experience. So why is this storyline or this narrative, why does it catch fire in male pain? Let's slow down to this point and ask, why does hypergamy in this storyline feel so true for so many men? It's because for a lot of them, it matches their pain. They've been ghosted, they've been rejected, they've been friend zoned. They've watched women fall for men who seem cruel or indifferent or even out of reach. And they've tried to be nice guys and they've gotten ignored. They've looked in the mirror and hated what they saw, believing that no woman would ever want them. And so when they hear a theory that says it's not your fault, it's just how women are, they finally feel like someone understands their pain. The hypergamy myth becomes a balm for the sting of rejection that they've been suffering. And there's a problem here. You see, the relief isn't the same as healing. This storyline may feel validating or vindicating, but it keeps men stuck in bitterness, stuck in fear, stuck in self-hatred that's all dressed up as realism. Because it doesn't just explain the pain, it freezes it in pain. Now let's turn biology into blame in the narrative that these men believe. A lot of these online communities take bits of evolutionary psychology and then they weaponize them. They'll say things like, women evolved to select only the fittest males. Or they'll say things like, it's just evolution and it's nothing personal. Or, you're genetically undesirable. Kind of sucks, but it's just the facts. Now let's be clear. Evolutionary psychology is a field that's full of debates and complexity and changing hypotheses. It doesn't offer hard and fast rules. It only offers theories and ones that are still being tested and even challenged. And yes, there are evolutionary pressures around mate selection. But you see, those pressures don't play out the same way across all cultures, or even all individuals for that matter. Humans aren't driven by biology alone. I mean, we have brains, we have consciousness, we have empathy, we have trauma, we have choice. So turning speculative biology into a life sentence is not science, that's fatalism. And when you use biology to justify your despair, or worse, to dehumanize others, you're no longer searching for understanding. You're reaching out for control. So what about the women who do act hypergamously? You might say, but I've seen women who act this way. I've had it happen to me. She left me when I lost my job. She only dated rich guys, and she said all she wanted was emotional connection. But in reality, she went for someone who is far more exciting. Fair. Let's talk about that. Yes, there's some people who use others. Some people lie, some people trade up, some people choose surface over substance. But that's not female nature. That's human behavior in a wounded culture. You've probably seen men do the same thing as well, right? I mean, who hasn't seen ditching partners when they gain weight, or dating younger women as a status symbol, or even ghosting when they're bored? See, cruelty is not gendered. Like immaturity is not a gender thing. Fear is not gendered as well. And when we chalk individual behavior up to biological destiny, we let people off the hook. We stop asking what shaped these individuals. We stop seeing the full picture. And yes, some women, they do act hypergamously, but so do some men. But that's not nature. That's unleashed behavior playing out in a culture that rewards superficial connection. The solution isn't to generalize. The solution is more so to become discerning. But here's how the hypergamy myth harms women and true connection. It's not just men who are harmed by this myth. Women feel the weight of this myth as well too. You see, when men enter relationships believing that women are naturally manipulative or status hungry or disloyal, it poisons the trust right from the very beginning. And women sense that suspicion. They sense the testing and the withholding. And even if they've done nothing wrong, they're treated like future betrayers. And this damages the connection before it's ever even begun. Some women are constantly asked to prove that they're not like those other women. They're in essence expected to overgive emotionally and to compensate for someone else's past wounds. They're punished for expressing needs because needs gets labeled as being manipulative. This isn't just unfair, it's unsustainable. The myth of hypergamy trains men to fear closeness and trains women to prove their worth under scrutiny. It turns dating into a battlefield. It kills safety. And without safety, intimacy cannot breathe. But here are the emotional roots behind this belief system. You see, we need to talk about what is underneath the hypergamy myth. Because beneath the stats and beneath the memes and the YouTube rants and the comment section warfare is grief. A grief that says, why wasn't I enough for her? Why did she choose someone else over me? Or why can't I be wanted for who I genuinely and truthfully am? The grief deserves compassion, it deserves care, and it deserves a place to be spoken and held. But too often, that grief gets covered in rage, in memes, in generalizations, and even in shame. Instead of reaching for connection, men start reaching for control. Instead of mourning, they start blaming, and instead of healing, they build walls. And the pain is real, the grief is real, but the hypergamy myth does not help men feel it. It helps them to hide that grief. And that's the real tragedy, because the very thing that these men are longing for, which is being wanted and chosen and seen, it gets pushed further away by the very belief that they're clinging onto. You see, real love does not work like that. If love were really a game or of power or of status and dominance, no relationship would ever survive the hardship. But real love is not about who ranks higher. It's about a shared humanity. Love grows in mutual vulnerability. It grows in respect and admiration. And it thrives in honest efforts and authentic attunement. A sense of safety and trust is necessary, and some people chase status, sure, but many are craving something deeper, especially in a world that's obsessed with performance. The people worth connecting with are not looking for dominance, they're looking for presence. And if you've only been taught that power is the only path to intimacy, then you've been robbed of the real story. When your worth feels like it's on trial, it's worth consideration. Let's just get honest for a moment here, shall we? One of the most painful experiences for men is feeling like their worth as a human being is constantly being judged, especially in dating. They feel evaluated, measured, and compared, and found wanting at the end of it all. It's not just about rejection, it's about what that rejection represents. If they say, if she doesn't choose me, it must mean that I'm not enough. Or if she prefers him, it means that I failed. If I can't attract someone, it means that I am defective. And these thoughts don't come from biology. These thoughts come from shame. And that shame is what the hypergamy myth tries to soothe by offering a villain, a cause, a system to blame. But blaming doesn't heal shame, does it? It just masks it. You might get temporary relief, but the pain and the ache of I'm not enough stays beneath the surface. And that's why the work isn't about proving women wrong or even proving yourself right. It's about healing that pain from the inside out. The trap of proving yourself is very real. And some men try to beat the hypergamy myth by leaning into it. They'll say, if I become rich enough or hot enough or jacked enough, successful enough, then I'll win. Then I'll be wanted. And to be clear, self-improvement is not the problem. It's the reason and the intention behind that self-improvement. If your motivation for growth is rooted in self-hatred or fear of abandonment, you'll never feel satisfied. You'll always be chasing an image. You'll become a product trying to impress a consumer rather than a person who's seeking mutual care. And if someone does want you, you might not trust it, because you'll always be wondering, do they love me or do they love the mask that I have made them win? That's the cruelty of conditional self-worth, because even in your success, it doesn't feel safe. The solution is not to reject growth, it's to reroot it in integrity, becoming someone that you respect, not just someone that you hope others will select. But here's the risk of being real. We need to be honest about this one. There's a reason why the hypergamy myth feels safer than intimacy. See, it keeps you from having to risk being known. If you believe women only want status, then rejection is what you have, not who you are. And that's easier to swallow. What happens when you start showing your real self? Your needs, your fears, your desires? And what happens if you're not chosen in the midst of that? That rejection hits deeper. It touches the raw nerve of vulnerability. And this is why I believe men default to performance or power, because it gives them a shield or like a buffer. But that shield also blocks love, because intimacy requires you to show up without your armor. It says, I'll let you see me, even if I don't know that you'll stay. Or I'll share with you what I feel, even if I'm not sure how you're going to respond. I'll risk being real with you, even if I've been hurt before. That's the cost of connection right there, because it also is the reward. So let's redefine attraction beyond the looks and the status and what it could be. Here's what most people don't talk about at this moment here. Attraction is not about appearance or achievement. Attraction is more about energy, about presence, about resonance. And some of the most magnetic people are not the richest or the best looking. They're the ones who make others feel safe or seen or alive. Qualities that build connection include curiosity without the controlling element, kindness without being calculating, setting your boundaries without arrogance, having humor without being cruel, displaying depths without despair. You see, these aren't marketable per se. They don't show up on the dating apps. They don't earn likes perhaps, but they make people feel real things. If you've been trained to only value external traits, it's easy to overlook the power of internal cultivation. But the people who see the real you aren't choosing you for your resume. They're responding to your presence. So part of this is really in how we unlearn scarcity thinking. One of the most damaging effects of hypergamy, especially as a narrative, is how it shrinks your imagination. It convinces you that there's a finite pool of women, only a small percentage are dateable, and they only want the top few men. That's scarcity thinking right there, and it makes every rejection feel catastrophic, every success feel impossible. But love is not a zero-sum game. Your You're not competing for scraps, you're searching for resonance. Scarcity thinking turns dating into this war zone, and abundance thinking reframes it instead as an exploration. Not everyone will see your value, but that doesn't mean that you have none. Not everyone will choose you, and that does not mean that you're unchoosable. Not everyone will stay, but that doesn't mean that you weren't worthy of love that lasts. Abundance doesn't mean easy, it means open. It means refusing to let pain make you bitter. It means remembering that there are more ways to connect than you have yet been shown, perhaps. Here's what healing the lens through which you see women could look like. The hypergamy myth, you see, doesn't just distort your self-image. It actually distorts how you see women. It trains you to scan for threats instead of care. It trains you to question sincerity and to assume rejection is exploitation. But when you let that lens harden, you stop seeing women as people, and instead you start seeing them as judges, users, or gatekeepers. And that's not fair to them. And it's not fair to you either. Because connection requires mutual humanity. And the more you reduce others to symbols, the more disconnected you become from your own humanity. Women aren't a monolith, like we said earlier. They're complex, vulnerable, growing beings, just like you. And if you can't start meeting them as people, fellow human beings, not patterns or it's at that point that things begin to shift. It's not always immediate, and it's not always clean in the way it happens, but slowly something softens and the armor begins to get lighter, the world less hostile, and connection seems like it's a possibility again. So here's what the move from hypergamy to humanity can look like. The truth is this: most people, regardless of gender, are searching for something real. They're not looking for performance, they're not looking for power, not dominance, but a presence and kindness, depth and attunement, care. And yes, some do chase status, but most crave safety. Some seek control, but most want to just be seen. And when you strip away the storylines, the talking points, the ideologies, what you find beneath all of this is a desire and a longing to be loved. Not as a status object, but as a soul. You don't have to play a game that you never agreed to play. You can step off the battlefield. You can stop performing and instead start connecting. And that begins with a simple truth. And that is, you're not too broken to be loved. And they are not too cruel to see your value. You are both human, hurting and hoping and reaching. And there's room for connection in that space. The hidden cost of resentment is as follows, though. Let's just take a moment and talk about what it feels like to live with this resentment. You see, when you walk through the world convinced that everyone is against you, that women are shallow and that the dating is rigged and that your chances are already decided before you open your mouth, then you start to shrink. Not just in relationships, but everywhere. You stop showing up fully, and you stop believing that anyone could genuinely like you. You start censoring your warmth, your softness, your curiosity, and you put your armor up. And the irony is this: the resentments that you're carrying to protect yourself becomes the very thing that actually keeps people from getting close to you. You become the embodiment of your own fear. It's unwanted, it's unseen, it's unreachable. And this is what hypergamy, as far as a storyline, costs you. Not just intimacy, but vitality and aliveness and openness and possibility. And those things matter far more than surface level traits that you were trained to chase. So what happens when you drop this hypergamy myth? What happens when you stop believing it? When you release the idea that women are biologically destined to discard you unless you're part of the elite? Well, you get to begin again with cleaner sightlines and a lighter heart. You start noticing women as individuals, not as threats. And you stop comparing yourself to every man in the room. And instead you start giving yourself credit. You start taking rejection less personally and curiosity far more seriously. And you begin asking questions like, who are these people really? Or what do I actually want in this connection? Or even further, what makes us feel safe together? So you move from transactional connection to relationships, from defense to discovery. And you start having experiences that weren't possible when you were bracing for betrayal. Because people feel when you stop fighting them. They can sense that. And that often is the moment that they lean in. But here's the role of integrity in attraction. You see, we've talked a lot about myths and mindsets, storylines, but let's bring it back to something far more grounded, which is integrity. Integrity isn't just morality, it's alignment. When your internal values match your external behavior, people can feel that. You become coherent, trustworthy, and rooted. And that's one of the most attractive things a person can embody. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means you're real. You say what you mean, and you own what you want, and you don't use tactics or games. You instead connect from the center and not from scarcity. You see, people are starving for that kind of energy. They're not looking for the tallest or the richest or the loudest person in the room. They want people who are themselves. Integrity isn't flashy, but it's magnetic. It tells people, I know who I am, and I'll meet you in your full self as well. And then there's intimacy, the second pillar that I rely on, and it begins when the story ends. If there's one thing that hypergamy myth does, it keeps people in that story loop. Even when someone likes you, you're always going to question it. Even when someone is kind, you are always going to doubt their motives. Even when someone chooses you, you're wondering, how long is it going to be before they ditch me? Because the story has become stronger than your reality. And so what happens when you stop telling this story? Well, you create a space for something new, something that is present, something that is unfiltered. You see, intimacy begins when the script of hypergamy ends. When you stop showing up with a narrative and you start showing up instead with your nervous system, like when you are present with yourself, your breath, your questions, your fears, your hopes, that's where connection lives. Not in the confidence of knowing, but in the courage of not knowing and still leaning in. So here's the bridge back to women. There are a lot of men who feel like women are the enemy. They don't say it aloud, but they carry it in their posture. They carry it in their tone, in their silence, in the way they avoid eye contact or only show up through performance, or keep women at an arm's length. This isn't just because men are inherently cruel or indifferent. It's primarily because many men feel deeply betrayed or unseen or confused. But holding on to that tension forever only creates more disconnection. And at some point we have to build the bridge back. Not to reclaim control, but to get what we think and it's not to get what we think we're owed, but it's more so to rebuild relationship, humanity, and your trust. And it starts with a simple shift. It goes from asking, why don't women choose me, to asking, what might help us feel safer together? And that's the kind of question that brings people closer, not just in dating, but in society. It turns women from adversaries into co-creators, and it turns men from victims into participants in their own healing. Now, here's what you were never told about your worth. Here's the part of the story that hypergamy, as far as a myth, will never tell you. You were already enough before you started trying to prove it. Your worth, it didn't rise or fall based on who chose you. And it doesn't live in your jawline or your bank account or your social ranking in society. It lives instead in your being you. You were born worthy of care and of connection and of closeness, and you don't have to become someone to deserve that. You just have to remember it. That's the path of reclaiming your relational life. It's not about winning at dating. It's about healing enough to stop performing and to start connecting. Because when you live from your worth, your energy changes. And that energy, it draws in people who aren't looking for perfection, they're looking for presence. You see, you are allowed to start again. If you've lived years believing this myth of hypergamy, you're not broken. You were trying to make sense of the pain and that took a lot of strength. And now you get to choose something else. Not because your pain was invalid, but because there's a deeper truth that's waiting beneath it. You're not invisible. You are not doomed. You are not evolutionarily a failure. You're someone who was lied to by a world that was confused, and it took fear as a fact. But your story doesn't have to end there. You're allowed to ask better questions. You're allowed to be seen in better ways and to love without needing to dominate. You're allowed to grieve what's been lost and still feel open to what's ahead. You're allowed to begin again, even today. So here are just my final words. The bridge is still there. The bridge back to us, men and women alike, it's not built from a theory, but it's built in trust, actually. From sitting down and setting down our shields, from letting go of myths that are no longer serving us, from telling better stories, ones that are rooted in integrity and intimacy. So if you carry this belief that hypergamy defines your fate, hear this. That belief is not your destiny. You don't need to chase someone else's definition of worth to be loved, because you are worthy of connection. Not when you level up, you're worthy of it now, in this moment.